Okay, so today we did a healing around the narcissist wound, or at least that's what I'm going to call it, which is the wound from narcissistic abuse. And I think what I've learned from my experience with narcissistic abuse that started when I was a child, and then, as an adult, what's familiar is familiar. And so I found myself in these kinds of dynamics over and over again. But it's kind of insidious because I've always thought of myself as someone who is strong and stubborn and determined and ambitious, and I have my own ideas of who I am. And also, I still somehow find myself in these dynamics where I'm either directly involved with a narcissist or indirectly involved with a narcissist. And somehow it feels like that narcissist has more power over my life than I do, and I don't understand it. And so what that means is I'm perpetually in this victim mentality where, the thing that came up in this healing is that I'm in this mentality where it's like at any moment someone can take this all away. And it's interesting that this came up because I had a whole other plan for what I was going to do. I was just introduced to these 5 pillars of manifestation, and it's like, let's dive into the 5 pillars of manifestation. But it just wasn't feeling right. So I've been having a hard time like sitting down and actually doing the healing. But it feels like this morning, what I was called to do was focus on healing the narcissist wound first, because what it does is it creates this wound creates a hole where our desire is meant to exist. This wound creates a hole where our needs exist. Our needs are the expression of our desires, right? So without desire and without need, it's really hard to call anything else in, because then we're perpetually seeking from outside of us of who we are and what we want, instead of tuning into that heart space. Because again, where that desire would be is a big fat hole. And unless we're in a dynamic, like I can say from my experience that when I've been in dynamics with narcissists, I thought I had a lot of needs and a lot of desires, but at the end of the day, if I reflect on it, I would feel empty, because I realized that a lot of what I thought was my desire was actually me fulfilling their desire. And I thought, oh, I'm so useful. I'm being used for divine purposes. I feel great. I feel loved. I feel needed more than anything. I feel needed. And it was because I thought I had this desire, and my desire was to serve people. But ultimately that is only because I didn't know what I wanted. And really it wasn't until I've had this really rough 2 years now, about to be 3, where I've kind of been isolated from everyone and everything. I've lost everyone and everything. You would call this a dark night of the soul, I'm sure. And it's suddenly, when I was here, I was like, oh, I have no idea what I'm meant to do. Like, it was really clear what I wanted to do and who I thought I was when I lived in LA. And then when I moved here, it's like, oh, well, what do I want? And who am I in this stage of my life? And it all became really cloudy and foggy. And I went down some paths that I thought I wanted, and turns out, no, I don't. So it's been in like not having access to someone feeding my desire, which is essentially just to feed their desire. Without all that, it's become really clear that, oh, that's like missing for me. I'm missing that part. But I know that I have dreams. I know that I have ambitions. I just can't connect with it. And anything that I think that it feels impossible to move in that direction. And I have all these great reasons, like, oh, my children just take so much energy. It's hard for me to be creative. Or, I have no one to collaborate with. I haven't met people to collaborate with yet, or I don't have any income, and so I can't invest in blah, 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 blah. Oh, when I get a client or when this happens, then I can do XYZ or follow XYZ. But there's all of this stuff that keeps my desires at a distance. And I think that it's because as long as it's at a distance, I never had to examine that I didn't really have dreams or desires of my own, or I'm like protecting them. And ultimately, what I'm protecting them from is some narcissist who's going to come through and take it away because that's what happened in my youth. And so that's what this healing is about. It's about, okay, yes, the narcissist created a wound and I can't change that. It's a shitty experience. It was a painful experience. And actually doing this healing brought up a lot of pain. And then since then, the decisions that I'm continuing to make to protect myself from someone else having more power over my life than me, which is, I'm sure, like, to me, it sounds like it feels so, I get enraged because it feels like an injustice against me. And it's not just me, there's lots of people. And I think this election also brings up the injustice of like, how can this small group of people have the power to decide how I can and can't live? And I don't believe in, like, I'm not in their religion. I actually don't have a problem with the things that they have a problem with. I don't want to regulate the things that they want to regulate. And I don't want to deregulate the things that they want to deregulate. So why does this small group of people have power over my life? And so I think that in these one-on-one healings, what I'm going to try to do is focus on how do we get back to being the center of our universe? How do we get back to being the hero of our story? And how do we get back to being empowered in a world that is trying, how do I say this? Not is trying to take that away. It is in a way trying to take that sense away. But I mean, realistically, there are people who are trying to take away our ability to live freely. Realistically, people are trying to legislate our bodies and our decisions and our expression. And in a smaller scale, I would say that it's already happening, not at a legal level, but at a cultural level. Have you tried wearing bright colors into an office environment? I mean, I was actually watching Elsbeth last night, and I've never related more to a character than I relate to Elsbeth. And what was kind of painful to watch is that everyone treats her like she's weird and kooky and off. And I was telling my husband, I was like, she dresses pretty conservatively. Like, you don't see cleavage. Nothing is sheer, nothing short. She's like dresses appropriately for her body and her age or whatever that means, right? And yet, because it's bright colors and multi-patterns, people are like, whoa, you're a bit much. Or because she sees the truth in things, it's like, she's a nuisance and not a gift. And it just kind of points out that these are the social ways that we regulate each other, right? Where we say like, whoa, you can't be like you if you want to belong. You can't be like you if I'm going to take you seriously, if I'm going to respect you. And I don't know about you, but and maybe this is because of my narcissist wound or whatever. What I am craving, what I desire is respect. And it's one of those things that we can't necessarily make people do. Like, we have no control over that. And it can be for something stupid that they don't respect us, like wearing pink lipstick. And I swear to God that this is a real life example. Like, people can assume that because you wear pink lipstick that you must not be smart or something. It's sexism. It's all of the isms. So that is what I'm going to be exploring in this series. We live in a society that really is activating my own victim wound, my own strong sense of justice, my own desire to be myself, and my own confusion about who that self is, especially as someone who just doesn't, like, I wish so hard, and this is actually a pretty interesting point. I wish so hard that I was like a neutrals girly and could just, follow all the rules and then everything would work out for me. But when I am that person, first of all, it makes my skin look bad. Second of all, it feels off somehow. And so people, even when I've worn exactly what I'm supposed to wear, people are still like, oh, there's something about you that doesn't belong. And it could be I could say a million reasons why that is. I've tried to write it off as a million reasons. Oh, maybe it's because I'm Mexican. Oh, maybe it's because, I don't know, I have curly hair and I didn't straighten it. Maybe it's because I'm a woman. Maybe it's because, but ultimately I'm making excuses for who I am and why it's wrong, and not thinking about them, not thinking about the systems that are wrong, that don't fit. The systems don't hold space for everyone. The systems are meant to be exclusive. So how do I feel empowered? How do I feel like someone who just doesn't like someone who wears pink has more power over where I can work and can't work? I've literally walked into the best paying job I've ever gotten on day one. And some woman just sent me home based on appearance alone. I got hired by like someone in the C-suite, and she was like, no, you can't dress like that. And I was wearing sleeves covered, dress up to the neck. I think it was because I was wearing lace pantyhose instead of solid pantyhose, and I had bright lipstick and big hair, and that's the only thing that I could think of. But she took one look at me and I was fired, like no questions asked. No, nothing I could do about it. And it was just like, sorry, you were inappropriate for the job. And how do I reconcile that? How can I be inappropriate for a job when my background, my interview, my skills all say that I'm perfect for the job, but my appearance alone, I can't do anything to change my appearance, right? And I'm not alone in experiencing this. And I would say that I am kind of privileged in this conversation because I do appear white in a lot of moments. There's just like something off about me, right? And there are people who do not get to try to just wear the right clothes and blend in, right? It doesn't, that's also a privilege. And so even as we go through this experience, that I think is a really big collective experience right now, it's about how do we, in the very real circumstances that someone can make a decision that keeps you from your job, your money, all of these things that feel like are essential for survival, especially in the capitalism that we live in today. How do we exist in this reality, these circumstances, and still bring the power back to ourselves, make it so that we are the center of our universe? So that's what these healings are all about. And I kind of wanted to start with the narcissist wound also because, I was watching the Martha Stewart documentary and I was like, wow, narcissistic people are really good at creating the world they want to live in. Even when it all goes wrong, they're still painting the picture of how we perceive it. So it's not that, that's another thing that I also struggle with, is about like reputation related stuff and how unfair it is that someone else can decide how I'm perceived in the world when it should be up to me. But I also am not taking control of it. And so, but narcissists are great at it, right? They're brilliant, and people will get on board with even very clear, blatant lies, things that don't quite, you call them on their thing and they say like, oh yeah, but it was different. That was nothing, but what he did was awful. And we're like, oh, okay, yeah, what he did is awful. So there are things that we can learn from narcissists that I think are really valuable. And so I was really curious what could come up. And immediately, the first thing that I saw in this healing is that it is a spectrum, right? So we think that spectrums are a straight line, a linear line, but really it's more like a horseshoe or a circle where the 2 points are more at the end of the spectrums are more similar than they are different. They're actually like equally different from the center, the neutral point, but they themselves are really close together. We see this politically when we look at the far right and the far left, right? It seems like they would be complete opposites at opposite ends of the spectrum is what we say. But when we think of a spectrum as a horseshoe or a circle with 2 points, like a circle that doesn't close, the far left and the far right are using a lot of the same language and a lot of the same ideals and a lot of the same control mechanisms. So they're more similar to each other than maybe someone who is, we would consider a centrist. So then we think of a narcissist and a victim, right? Where in a way they're really similar because there's a lot of like focusing on the external rather than the internal. So there's a lot of external blame about the way that life is that's really similar, but they're doing it in such different ways where one person is like, the narcissist would be someone who has great control and power over their fantasy bubble that they live in, because that's what a narcissist is, right? It's someone who's created this fantasy island bubble where they live. And part of why they exert so much control and power over people is because they're trying to make everyone else see the world as they do, as their bubble, to validate their bubble, to make their bubble real. And a victim, which I'm including myself in this, is someone who has no bubble and is like desperately looking for a bubble to belong to. There's no bubble. And we don't control other people, but we do allow ourselves to be controlled to belong to a bubble, right? So it's like opposite, same, but different. So that's what we're doing here is we're kind of getting rid of this like distance between victim and narcissist. Like, oh, so we're doing the same thing. We're both blaming the external world. We're both focused on creating the external world and not creating as Abraham Hicks would say, the rocket ships of desire from internally and launching those out and then following those, right? So that is what we're healing. And in order to heal it, the big pill to swallow is that we're more similar than we think. And there actually is something to learn from them, or else they wouldn't be in our lives. And maybe we don't want to abuse power. Maybe we don't want to control others. Maybe we don't want to tell other people how to live. Maybe we do really deeply, truly want to serve people. And that's how we end up in these dynamics, right? And maybe, sometimes I get the feeling that maybe I abused power in a past life. And so I'm realizing at the other end of the narcissistic dynamic that it's really painful. And so now I'm like, oh, I don't want anything to do with that. But that's not it either. I'm pushed too far away. We need the neutrality point where we have our desires and it's not dependent on other people to make it real. We can just trust. We send those rocket ships of desire, right? And we can trust that it's going to take shape around us. And maybe that's the thing that the victim and the narcissist have in common, that it's not necessarily about external whatever, but it's about a lack of trust, not trusting that it can take shape without someone else being involved, right? Okay, so I did pull a card for this healing to give us some information, and I love this Radiant Wilds deck. As a desert witch myself from New Mexico, I am obsessed with the desert landscapes. And so the card that I pulled is the Six of Cups reversed. The Six of Cups reversed. And so it says here, are you hiding in your past? The Six of Cups reversed suggests that you're idealizing distant days, or perhaps you're attaching to traumatic stories to the point of letting them define you now. Either way, you are missing the joys and opportunities the current moment holds. Today is all we have, so practice acceptance of your current circumstances. Try to look at them through fresh eyes. We're meant to live and to change, to walk its winding journeys. Our brains are plastic and evolve as we do. All options might not be as open to you now, but there is so much color in truly committing to your picks. Besides, your youthful energy still accompanies you just as it always has. You can connect with its wonders in your current experience and relationships. That is, if you care to look. Which feels pretty on the nose. So, let's get into this healing. And I will say that it feels a lot more like these channeled messages, these little like setting up definitions and expectations, because we're going to make this a series over the next several months until it feels complete, where we're working with this narcissist wound, where we're working through this inability to connect with our needs, our desires, to be the star of our universe, the center of our universe. Because, when we have this narcissist wound too, it's easily conflated with like, if I'm the center of my universe, then I'm going to be this awful, abusive person. And I don't want that either. I want to be nothing like them, or whatever the story may be. So it's like it feels like a tricky dance because we're so intertwined. It's like it is a codependent relationship, right? I actually had to learn. I didn't even know that I had narcissistic abuse, even though my grandmother is like textbook narcissist. No idea. I had been gaslit for years. I had no idea. People are using that term all the time. And when people abuse these terms, it makes me go like, ugh, well, that couldn't be me. If everyone has a narcissistic ex, then it couldn't be mine. You know what I mean? And then it wasn't until I started looking into codependency and read Codependent No More that I even realized like, oh shit, my grandmother was a narcissist, and I'm in a codependent relationship with her. And I didn't think that I did because I always fought against her. But because I was fighting, I was still choosing to be in the dynamic instead of just being like, oh, no, thanks. I don't need to play this. I picked up a controller and was like, let's battle. I'll fight you for it. I'm going to stand up for myself. I must be independent and strong. But no, I was participating in the dynamic. And I think that there's a lot of lessons in that I'm trying to see when it comes to this political climate too, where do I have to assert who I am, or can I just be like, oh, no, thanks. I don't want to I actually don't want to play this game. Today, you play your game however you want, and I'm going to go look for a better game. So yeah, it's interesting to see how all of these are kind of so wound up in each other that it was even hard to notice in the first place. So because this is such a deep and personal wound for me, I tried to take a lot of space. And when that happens, I get called to clean the space. So I had to like wash all the dishes and disinfect the kitchen and clean up the room that I'm in now. And, cleanse. I use pinon needles to cleanse the space and take a moment to sit down. I could feel that there was like a lump in my chest that was forming, which made me realize like, oh, we're really going to be working in the heart space today. And so as I was just allowing that lump to become really felt and really visible and really heavy, it felt really heavy, I started creating the container. And anytime I create the container, it's in space. I ground it to the center of the earth so that it's grounded. And that grounding cord is kind of like a vacuum, where it's like those old fashioned vacuums in homes where it's like in the walls and it's a tube, and you could just plug in the vacuum to the wall, and then it'll suck everything out to one. We had one, it was like downstairs in the garage. So it kind of feels like that. So as it's grounded, it's like providing stability and support, but it's also sucking out all the debris and the inauthentic energies and the heavy stuff, like whatever comes out that gets shaken out of us as we go through this process. And I also plug into the center of the universe that creates stability, like as above, so below. And so we have this earthy, grounded, dense energy holding us at the bottom, and this cosmic, massive. It's like the opposite, where Earth is, all this matter condensed into one space. The cosmic energy is the same amount of energy, but spread out infinitely. And so it's this like contraction and expansion, both energies stabilizing this container. And then we kind of got right to work. And what immediately started to happen is that lump in my chest started to rise, and it felt like, oh, we're going to do like a karma release. There's I see karma as stones, like almost like worry stones, where they're really smooth, or boulders. And to cleanse the karma, release the karma, I put them into a lake. So you can like skip the stones in a lake, or sometimes a river will show up, but we put them in the water so that they get cleansed and released, and their momentum gets taken somewhere else and out of our field. So it felt like, oh, that's happening, but it was getting stuck. It was getting stuck between my chest and my throat. And that's when I got called to do gender grounding. Now, we've already done just like a regular grounding cord into the center of the earth, but gender grounding is something that I learned from Art Geiser. And I think he learned it from some psychic psychology or whatever that. John Friedlander, I think, is the writer of that book. And gender grounding is where, we all have masculine energy and feminine energy, and it's all like to varying degrees. And ideally, they're balanced. We have both always, and hopefully it's balanced. And so it feels like, in order to get whatever this thing was that was on my chest, I needed to do some gender grounding, because this energy was thrown off. And it felt like, so we started with the masculine energy, because that masculine energy is the one that's like really off for me, which is interesting because I would identify as more masculine energetically. Now, I present as hyper feminine, but energetically, I've always connected more to like masculine energy. And, in my youth, I was like misgendered sometimes or whatever, because I was like really into my masculine energy. But lately it's off. Like, I'm still using my masculine energy as a tool. When I'm in fear, I go super into my masculine energy, because that's the part that's like in control, and I've got this, and I'm going to protect everyone, and don't worry about it. I'll do it. But what I was seeing is that it's almost like it was spinning on a hamster wheel, and it wasn't grounded in anything. So the spinning was creating all this like static electricity, all this chaotic energy, and it needed to be grounded. So we pulled down a masculine grounding cord to the center of the earth. And then in that, what we do is we release any inauthentic masculine energy and just let it go. And that's where it felt like all the societal expectations and norms and stories about masculine energy got pulled the fuck out. And there were a lot. And it's kind of conflated with, a lot of, again, the political environment, the cultural environment, the capitalistic environment, and this sensation of like hustle and go, and even the way that like you are the master of your destiny, or you're in control of your life, you are the center of your universe, was from this like hyper masculine perspective that wasn't grounded because it was inauthentic. And so we let all of that go and let it go and let it go and just drain. It's on the right side of the body, right? But because I was so much like imbalanced in that energy, it was like creeping into my left side too. So we let that go. And what we do is we call in authentic masculine energy from above, from the center of the universe and from our heart space, and from the earth. And so we have these 3 points of refilling authentic masculine energies. So we still feel that drive, that giving, that pushing out into the world, but in a way that's not motivated by fear or anxiety or hustle or this is what I'm supposed to do, but it's just a drive, a momentum, and energy. And then once we were really full of authentic masculine energy, then it was time to ground the feminine energy. And for the feminine grounding, we released the stories, the societal expectations, what that's meant to look like and feel like. And then for me, I also felt this story about, feminine energy is about receiving, but to receive something, it has to come from somewhere. And there was a part of me, not even a part of me, that the story I had to release was that I couldn't trust who was handing me the thing that I'm receiving. If I'm going to receive, like, whoa, what am I getting here? Because I can't trust what you're feeding me. I can't trust what you're giving me. Poison, you're giving me garbage. You're invading my space with your weapons. You're invading my space with your expectations, and I don't want to receive any of that. And so there was a part of me that was having trouble receiving because it felt like there was I didn't consent to what was being fed to me or what was being offered to me, or I needed the space to consent, or I needed the space to see what was being given to me. And so it was blocking all of my ability to receive. And so we needed to let go of this, like, whoa, stop. I need to see everything. Because what that is it's not discernment. It's, well, number one, it's like a block to trust, or not, I'm not trusting my ability to receive. I trust my ability to make it happen. Like, oh, I don't need to get a gift of this thing. I'll just make it myself. When I have a sewing machine, I have a craft thing, I'll just make it myself. Thank you. It was that mentality. So it was like blocking the feminine flow of reception in favor of this like ungrounded masculine energy that was just creating chaos. So it was this lack of trust. It was a lack of safety. It was a lack of, what is this? That, I've been fed painful things. I've been fed violent things. And I have been getting those from what seems like my higher self, or from God, or from the universe. And so how am I supposed to trust the universe when the universe has fed me shit and pain and whatever? And so that was the thing that needed to be grounded, because it was getting caught too. Like, I couldn't ground this receiving energy. It was like backing everything up, like going through TSA or going through customs or something. And one person is like, well, why are you asking me all these questions? And it's holding up the line for everything else. And so we had to release this doubting sensation. We had to release this need to inspect every single thing that came through. and open up trust in order to allow the flow. And then once that block was released, then this receiving energy could really begin to flow. And then what I was being shown was that, this wound that we're working on today, this narcissist wound, for me, it was really activated the moment I gave birth. That's when it felt like, up until the moment I gave birth, I had a lot of control in my life. I had a lot of power to create the world that I was living in. I had little of course I had dramas. I had relationship dramas. I had all the dramas, right? But to some degree, I had control or say in how I participated in that. And then when I gave birth, suddenly it felt like I was at the mercy of this baby. I was at the mercy of my partner who I had this baby with. I was at the mercy of the nurses who threatened Child Protective Services or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there's the doctors. I was at the mercy of the world that we live in a really vulnerable way that I hadn't experienced since childhood. So this wound got really reactivated when I gave birth, because it puts us back into this really vulnerable state where we don't have to take a back seat, but it's a balance. It's a balance point where there is something external. Like we do swing the pendulum towards this external thing that we're responding to. And then as the baby grows up, then we pendulum back to the center point. But because of my experience with being a vulnerable child who relied on adults who died or were not available or were violent or lots of things happen when you're a child, right? And you do rely on the outside world because you're still learning your power, or you're being told that the way that you do the world is wrong because you're weird or you don't know anything yet, or, there's lots of ways that we're socialized when we're young. So going back to that state was very scary. It's hard to trust. It was like, oh no, I'm open to all of this stuff again, where when I was just a grown-up single person, or even like a grown-up in a relationship in the world, I had a lot of power, and suddenly I felt powerless again. And that was really scary. So that's what we're reactivating. And then from then, it's kind of been growing and hardening since then. And that's when that pressure in my chest started to come back. It was a big ball, and it felt like it needed to come up and to get out instead of go down. So we're going back up through the throat and through the mouth, and it's like, oh, here comes this big karma. Because the thing that happens is that karma gets created based on our decisions, right? And karma is not this like, I do this thing and then something comes back around. That's like one aspect of karma, I guess. But the karma that I deal with is more like momentum. So we create momentum with our decisions, with our actions, how we treat people, sure, but also from our inaction, from the momentum that we are trying to build and we stall. And so there's this like pressure building of this thing that we're meant to do, that we want to do, of these things that this direction we're supposed to be going down our path. And we have this big stall in the way of it. And so the karma is also creating this like pressure point that, against this block. And so it feels painful. So that's what felt like was coming up and coming up and coming up. And then when it got out of my mouth and onto the ground, it looked like a massive karma stone. And I was like, whew, glad that's out. But instead of washing away down a river, it was weird. It was staying there. So we like washed it with water. And then we realized that it's not just a stone. It's an amber. It looked like an egg, like an amber egg. And inside it was a person, a me, or a you in this situation, in the fetal position. And so there you are in the fetal position inside this amber stone. And what it seems like, I looked up the meaning of amber, and it's this protective talisman that is used to expel negative energies or to protect you from negative energies. So it almost felt like there's an aspect of yourself that was encased in this amber to protect you from this experience or this dynamic with a narcissist that was negative and painful and awful. And so it's almost like you took this part of yourself that was your desires, that was the part of you who has needs, the part of you who has dreams, and encased this part of you in amber to protect it. And, for a short term, it seemed like it was a great idea. But then when that dynamic continued for a long time, and that dynamic transformed and maybe moved not just with this one person, but now our dynamic with the collective, because we're also dealing with the problem with the collective is that it is like this narcissist energy, which is why it's perfect that the symbol of this climate is this malignant narcissist that we're in this crazy dynamic with, because that's the collective energy, is like the symbol of the collective energy. So that dynamic has lasted so long that instead of this amber being soft, it's now completely solid and hard and stuck. The person inside that we were meant to protect is now fossilized inside of there. And so I consulted with the angels and guides, like, okay, how do we get them out of there? How do we get you out of there? And I was told to look up how to dissolve amber. And there are 2 ways. The first one is by using chloroform, and that one felt wrong. Like, no, that's not the right way. And then the other thing I saw was that 350 degrees, the amber softens, and then we can get you out of there. And so I realized, like, oh shit, we're going to have to put you in the fire. And it's this, what the fire does is that it softens these defenses. It softens these protective mechanisms that we've created so that we can free this part of you that has been fossilized. And what I was realizing is that, like, oh, this is a soul retrieval, but instead of going to retrieve your soul from somewhere else, we're actually retrieving your soul from deep inside of you. It's almost like this fossilized egg was it was filling up your solar plexus and your heart space. So like your whole torso was this version of you that's been fossilized, and we're just kind of carrying it around until it feels safe to let them out. But it's really hard to let that part of you out when it never feels safe, because again, this dynamic has transformed from one that's like an intimate relationship to now a collective relationship. And we don't want to, the way that the narcissists win is if we decide to stop living, that we decide to put our dreams and desires on hold until it's safe to bring them out again. Well, what if it's never safe again? And then we just live our life without that? That's tragic. And that's a choice that we're making. And that's why it shows up as karma, because it's this choice that we're making to not live our lives because we're waiting for the right moment. Sounds so logical and practical. And, like it's probably, you would think that it's a good idea, but at the end of the day, then you're not living as you. And that's not worth it either. That's not worth it at all for a second, for a moment. And so realizing that, I just started crying because it's a really painful thought. Like, it's one thing to be hurt by someone outside of me, and it's another thing to make the choice that in protection, for good reason, but it's hurting me more. It's creating this massive lump, this massive blockage in the biggest part of me. And so, do you want to walk around with this fossilized, hardened version of you at your core, really. And so if the answer is no, then the way that we release you, the way that we connect you back to your dreams is to put you through the fire. And it felt like there, I got scared for a minute, like, oh, is this going to be ethical? Is this going to be dangerous? Like, what do we do? And what I was shown is that you are already in the fire. There's all of these external opportunities where I don't know about you, but I've been feeling it. I've been feeling a lot of like anything that could go wrong has gone wrong. Anything that could, we're talking fender benders, we're talking fines, we're talking big expensive mistakes. I just got off a plane yesterday and I left my backpack with my laptop and passport and cards and everything on the shuttle. Luckily, they brought it back to me, but it's like those kind like little things that feel like little things that are actually really expensive mistakes. Like all of it feels like going through the fire. So we're already going through the fire. So it's not going to be a bad, like, shit, now I have to go through the fire to release this now. No. You're already going through it. But now it's about consciously seeing how going through this fire is for you and not to you, right? And so this for you is what the fire does, is it's melting these defenses, melting the stuff that's become hardened and fossilized. It's melting all of that so that we can come back to who we are, come back to who we are, which is represented through our desires. And so this fire came through. And what I was shown is that it is a blue fire. It's like a blue on the top and green at the center fire. That's this like Atlantean fire, this Atlantean technology, this Atlantean flame that I'll have to do more research on because I don't know what that means. That is available to us to release, to help melt this. And very quickly, like it melted, and then suddenly you stood up. This fossilized version of you stood up. And what it seemed like is that this person was trapped, even though they're a grown-up, they were trapped not necessarily at the age you are now, but a while, like maybe when you were a child or a teenager, and put in the amber at that point. And then they continued to grow because they weren't dead. They weren't, so it's different than a soul retrieval that happens outside of the body. Because when it's outside of the body, it's almost like that age, that person gets frozen in time, or they're stuck in a time loop. And they're out somewhere it could be on Earth, like a ghost, like an imprint, or it's stuck in space, or it's stuck somewhere else. It's through a past life or what, like it gets stuck through a portal. There's all these places where these pieces of our soul can break off and be frozen in time. But this soul retrieval, I think because they stayed inside your body, they continued to age with you and grow with you, and they weren't stuck in time. They were just, fossilized. They were just covered, surrounded with you. And so they were the same age as you are now. And you go, and this person has just been through the fire. This person has just been imprisoned. You know that feeling of being a prisoner in your own life? This part of you actually experienced that. And unfortunately, it was out of an abundance of caution, out of protection. But I guess if we really think about it, that's what any prison population is, right? We're like putting them away to protect society, which is a deeper conversation. But what that means is that, we put this person in this casing. And so there's like a little bit of forgiveness that needs to happen, right? There's a little bit of, not that version of you needs forgiveness, but it's about like self-forgiveness. Like you need to forgive yourself for realizing like, oh shit. And this realization, like, oh, I did this to myself, is a heavy one. So we have lots of like Reiki energy, lots of angelic support around you, holding space for you to feel these feelings. And what we're realizing is that your heart comes out of your chest and it's also surrounded in this amber. But instead of being hard, it hasn't had this amber for as long, so it's kind of melty, like gooey, like sap. And so, but it's already like started the process of like, protecting your heart. And what we realize is like, oh shit, I have also experienced this imprisonment. Like my heart does feel imprisoned because it's stuck in this prison of protection. And while I was thinking this, these messages come with lots of pieces. It's all like holographic. So it's never just one sentence. It's this packet of information that unfolds over time. And so, I had this vision of raising my children who do dangerous things sometimes, and the ways that I, as an anxious parent, that I, as a parent with OCD, am like, don't climb that, don't do that, don't do. And so I'm trying to protect them so we don't have to go to the emergency room. And it's creating like, now that my son is getting older, it's like I can see the anxiety. I can see the way that when he mimics it to other children, like, don't do that or you'll break your leg. It's really hard to see like, oh, I'm creating this cage in an effort to protect him, but really he's not learning anything from it except for anxiety. And so it's kind of like that feeling of like doing it for your own good, but it's creating karma because it's blocking our ability to experience life and learn the lessons from the pain. Again, it's trying to block ourselves from experiencing the pain is creating karma that is where we're missing the lessons. Like you have to go through the fire to receive the lessons, which is why we had to go through the fire to release this protection. And the lessons are kind of what we came here for in the first place. And the lessons are usually not as painful as the thing that we're worried about. Now, as someone with OCD, I have a very creative, vivid idea of all the ways that things could be horrifically bad and wrong. And so I do block everything for the chance that these worst case scenarios can play out. And so that's the thing that we have to, that it's creating this prison of protection, and that's hardening and casing. It's not letting us go through the fire that's actually not as bad as the scenario that we're painting in our heads. And so go through the fire, you'll get the lesson. And then on the other side of that too is this, once we can reconnect with this part of ourselves that has the desires and the dreams, then we can deal with the narcissistic dynamics. But as long as we don't have this part of ourselves, for fear that someone can take away our dreams, what if I do manifest this, someone can take it away from me. It's not safe to do this because someone can destroy it. Someone can squash it like a bug. Someone can squash us like a bug for daring to dream this, right? We could risk death and starvation and poverty and homelessness, and all these horrific things can happen to us if I dare to dream this. So I'm going to, when I did dream and it came true and became a punching bag, then I became a target, then it became a painful situation. It's not safe to have these dreams. It's not safe to have success. We encase it and we put it away because it's not safe. When we have that hole, it makes us the perfect target for a narcissist. And what I was being shown in my case, so take this if it resonates, and if not, then it's not for you. It's just for me. In my case, my grandmother, I only became a target for her when I was a little bit older. I was like 11 or 12. But before that, it wasn't until I was like 10, I think, where I locked away this part of me that it was unsafe to dream, because all it took was one event. In the blink of an eye, everything could change. People die. You get pulled from your home. You're no longer around your friends. You're no longer at your school. You're living a different life, right? And so this life that I had created that I loved so much could just be taken in an instant. And so it felt like it was unsafe to love things, anything that deeply, because it can just be taken away in blink of an eye. And that is part of also what, by not having these dreams, by not having this part of me, it did make me more susceptible to serving a narcissist who had very clear dreams. Or I think I was still like in my initial dynamic, I was still holding on to my dreams and fighting for them. But then it became like, oh, now it's not worth the fight. Like there's all of these stories, right? So we want to reintegrate this aspect of ourselves so that we fill this hole where our dreams and desires were. It doesn't matter if it's safe or not to have them, because the only thing that matters in this life is that we have them. And if not, then we become the perfect match, the perfect puzzle piece for a narcissist. So we have to do this first. So when we do the self-forgiveness part, and then you give your fossilized person a hug and have a lot of compassion, and you love them so much, and you love their dreams, and you love their heart, and you embrace them. And as you're embracing, suddenly all the people who love you, your children, your partner, your friends, your pets, your angels, your spirit guides, suddenly everyone who loves you, your family, your coworkers, your neighborhood barista, anyone who loves you shows up, and they start to hug you too. And this is another part where I wept, because it's like, it felt so unsafe to have this version of ourselves out in the world. And yet there were people who love this version of us so unconditionally and so deeply. And they are just so excited to be reunited with this person. Even the people that like never would have known this aspect of you, they actually knew on the other side, like your soul family, right? And there were some people that showed up that were like, you haven't met them on earth yet. They're your soul family, but you needed to be reunited with this part of yourself in order to meet them here. And so they're like, yes, now I can find you. Now I can see you. Now I know who you are. This is the person that I know. This is the vibe, the frequency of the person that I know. So as you're hugging, as they're embracing you, they suddenly all start to hold hands, all the people who love you, and they start to spin around in a circle and spin around in a circle faster and faster. And suddenly everyone's spinning around in a circle. And this energy that's created from this spinning creates a vortex around you and this other aspect of you until you kind of melt together. And then the heart that had been covered in amber, we had Archangel Raphael heal that, clear up the amber and get rid of all the sticky stuff. And we used that heart as a puzzle piece that it was almost like a lock that we can use to connect you with your dreams, that aspect of you that's your desires. So as you came together and melded back into one, putting your heart back in place, this cleaned, vulnerable, open heart back in place, locked you together and is going to help you reintegrate. And so the feeling that I got is that this is not something that's like, boom, suddenly you're one, but this heart is holding you in place so that you can melt back into each other over the course of the next 3 weeks is what it feels like. Okay. So now that you're back and whole, it's time to deal with this narcissism dynamic. And the one thing that we're going to work on today is the story that someone else can take it all away from me. Someone else can squash my dreams. Someone else has the power to decide my life over me. That I can build it, sure, I can create it, and then they can just come in and shit all over it. They can take it away. They can make me not want it. They can make it not worth it. That's all a story. It's just a story. It's just a perspective. And the dynamic kind of beat us into submission so that we believe this story, so that it's well, it's not worth it for me to follow my dreams. Let me just help you with yours so that I feel like I have a purpose in life. If I'm not going to pursue my purpose, let me at least help you with yours. So to get out the story, the way that I saw the story is that it was strips of paper with a story someone else can just take it all away. Someone else can just take it all away. Someone else can just, and there's the strips, you started to pull it out of your mouth. And it felt like it was wrapped all inside your mouth, around your jaw, around your throat. It was caught in a big knot in your throat and wrapped around your heart and your lungs. And so as we pulled it out, it was kind of squeezing. It was wrapped in your intestines, and it wasn't on your bones. Sometimes I see these stories written on your bones. So that was the thing where it's okay, well, that's not the issue. It was just wrapped around the bones. So then we needed help to pull it out because it was really getting stuck. So we just washed over you with really golden light, golden water. And what we realized is that the places where this story was getting stuck was that all throughout your body were these bubbles. They almost look like Christmas ornaments that had moments in time that corroborated the story. So they were all the moments in time where someone did actually shit all over your dreams, that you got something and then it made it not worth it, or that you tried to fight for something that you wanted and lost, or that you finally got everything that you wanted and then it was taken all away in a really violent or tragic way. And so all of these moments in time just were proofs of this story, and we can't let go of the story fully. We could pull pieces of it out, but it was getting caught. So we couldn't release this story fully until we were willing to let go of those moments. And what I've come to realize is the imagery that I have for this is that we take these moments in time and we pull them out of our body. We call them all out of our body, right? And let them sit in front of us and we can see them playing out. And there's a lot. There's a lot of evidence for this. And again, the saying that kept coming up is that it's happening for you, not to you. It's happening for you, not to you. And that's a reprogramming of this victim mentality. And this victim mentality is that someone else has power over my life, more power over my life than me, right? So the thing that wanted to come through, but we couldn't believe because we had, look at all this proof. Oh, it's happening for me, but look at all this. Look at all the ways that my life has been ruined. Things were going great. What's the point of trying again? It's only gotten worse now. We have all of these proofs. So it creates defensiveness. It creates, jabs. It creates poisonous darts at people who we think are, I think of someone who I, at one point in time, considered my nemesis, who is a narcissist, is diagnosed as the triad of evil. And she has very openly proclaimed that, and yet is beloved. But she's someone who I felt like had more power over my life, and could poison the well. It felt like she was poisoning the well of my life, and people believed her over me, and it was very frustrating and painful, and it made me throw poison darts back, right? And so it creates this this sense of injustice. It does poison the well, and it does make us resort to poison as well. So so we have to let go of these moments in time, because we think that holding on to these moments will protect us from it ever happening again, or we think that these moments in time will make us wiser or smarter or better equipped for whatever. But it doesn't make us better at navigating. It actually makes us worse because we become reactive with these. We become poisonous, we use poison darts. We resort to weapons instead of love when we hold on to these moments. And so the way that we get rid of them visually, again, we pull them all out of our body so that we can see them, all the proofs, and we have to be willing to say, to let go of them. And to let go of them, we can wash over them with earth, wash over them with water, wash over them with fire, just set them aflame. And that turns all these moments to ash. And it feels really vulnerable, because without these moments, you feel like you're not going to be safe. You're not going to recognize when it happens again. But you know what? You will, because you've already experienced it, and you can trust that you have that experience in your Akashic record. You'll remember it when you need to know it. It has already calibrated your discernment. And now you'll have more access to it, because instead of relying on reactive programming, these moments in time when they're stuck in our body, they create if-then statements. So if this happens again, then I know I'll do this. Or if this, then I'll, then they'll, then blah, 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 right? So if-then is it is literally programming language. Most programs rely on if-then statements. So instead of using programming from these proofs, when we let them go, it feels vulnerable, but we'll be able to use intuition and wisdom and discernment and knowledge, and we'll be free to decide how we want to respond to it, instead of reacting in the if-thens system that's created by these moments. So we let the fire turn these moments to ash, and then we call in air to blow it away, and it blows the ashes up to the Akashic records, so they're not gone. It happened. It's real. It's valid. But now we don't have to carry it in our body, because it's a lot of weight. And so this process that we just did is what I think forgiveness is. That's why forgiveness is like the salve to anything. It's like the thing that heals everything, because forgiveness is not this like, oh, I forgive you or whatever. Forgiveness is letting go of the proof, letting go of the moment in time, these stuck little pictures. And then it creates freedom to flow through life again. These pictures, these moments create resistance, and forgiveness is washing away, letting go of the resistance and trusting that we're wise, that we know, that we're capable of navigating. Should this, hopefully never, because we got through it, right? And our forgiveness shows that, like, oh yeah, I learned this lesson from that experience. And so our forgiveness shows that we probably don't need that lesson anymore, and we can move forward into something else, and hopefully a more empowered version of us that's creating our life, right? So once all these moments are forgiven, once all these moments are dissolved and sent to the Akashic record and out of our body, then we can pull out that story from your body everywhere. This like ticker tape, I think is what it's called, that says someone can take it all away. We pull it all out and we throw it into a bonfire, and we let that story go. We let it burn. Now, what this does is our habit is still to go to that story. That's the story that we know. That's the response to like, oh, why did this happen? Oh, it's because blah, 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 right? That's the story we know. And so what this process does is it creates space so that instead of that being the default automatic answer that's produced by our brain, we have a little bit of a pause. So we can always go back and recreate this story and wrap it all over our bones again or wrap it all over our body again. We can recreate it, but at this point it's a choice, right? So this energy work, what it does is it creates the space to come up with a different story. And the story can be, I trust my ability to navigate my life as it shows up, when it shows up. I trust the universe to deliver things for me. I trust my ability to create the life I prefer to live. Whatever story it can be, like I can do hard things. I can recognize red flags. We get to come up with a new story. And so that is the work that hopefully this process will create space for. Now, after we got rid of all that ticker tape, I asked, it feels like there's still the story's still lingering somewhere. And what I saw is it's not in your bones, it's not in your organs, it's in your blood, which tells me that this is actually ancestral programming. So this feeling that someone else can take it all away, someone else has the power to dictate our lives, is an inherited trauma. And so to get this story, there's like little pieces of the story in every single cell. And it's almost like in the mitochondria, which makes me think that this is a maternal, but it could be on either side. And for some people, it's on both sides of the family. So it's like there's multiple strips of this story in each cell. And so what I was shown is that it was time for plasmapheresis, or whatever the machine. I used to donate platelets. And so it's a machine that spins your blood that separates out the different cells. And so this was a special machine. I always work with Archangel Raphael as like the angel doctor. And so he sets us up on a special machine that's to help clean the blood using this like plasmapheresis. So you like sit down and squeeze a little ball while the machine spins your blood, and you can like, watch Netflix or whatever while it's happening. And as this process is happening, it just starts to feel a little bit lighter and a little bit lighter. And what we're seeing is that this process, releasing it from your blood, also releases it from your next generations coming off of you, to your future, and also to the past. It's helping pull this out of everyone that it's connected to as well. So your ancestral work is really beautiful because it does impact everyone in your family as well. And so once the process is done, now we've really released the story from everywhere. Like this idea that someone else has the power over my life. Someone else can just take it away. No matter what I choose, no matter what I want, someone else can always take it away. That's the story we got rid of. It's gone from every cell of our being. And so now I am the center of my universe, and I choose how I want my life to go. And I have chosen my life path. And I trust that if it is aligned for me, if it's aligned for the life I chose to live on this planet, it will show up for me. And what this means too, which is great for someone like me with OCD, is that, there are certain worst case scenarios that play out in my head all the time. And I get really afraid that I'm manifesting it because, there's a part of me that thinks I manifested poverty by being so afraid that we were going to run out of money that, we did. And then we got out of it and then we lost it all again. So, there's a part of me that feels like I manifested it. And there are worse things that I have worried about that I'm like, oh shit, am I going to manifest this? But what I'm being shown is that we manifest the things that are aligned with us. And so there are certain things like in our pre-life planning or whatever, in our blueprint, there's like the potential for certain things to happen. And if that's like not really a thing that you're meant to experience in this life, then there's no amount of manifestation techniques that will bring it about, right? So that's good news for the things that you really don't want. But what that also means is that saying that you hear, which, it's hard to believe when you're walking around with all this proof in your body of that someone else has the power to, no matter how much I manifest, no matter how much work I do internally, someone outside of me has the power to take it all away. And again, this could be some narcissist, friend, lover, lover of our lover. It could be some narcissist boss, some narcissist president, some narcissistic God, right? Some narcissistic universe that can take it all away. Like, it's not just like a literal person can come and shit all over it, can take it. And like my grandma is the person that's going to come and take it all away, wipe it all out from under me, pull out the rug from under me, but also God, also the universe, right? So that's the story that we're releasing so that we can say that we can connect to what is it that we desire in this life based on the plan that we created for this life. These gifts that I have, these dreams that I have, what was it that my purpose? Nobody can take that from you. It's that saying that if it's meant for you, then it'll happen no matter what, right? No one can take it away from you. I think that near-death experiences are the perfect proof of this because even like death is not so, like someone can shoot someone in the head and they still can't take that person's life if it's not their time to go. And I think that's a very dark way to see something that's actually pretty helpful. So if it's yours, no one can take it away. If it's yours, it's going to show up. And we just need to be open to receive it, right? And to be open to receive it is all about trusting, is about being on our path. And the ways that we get distracted from our path is when we go to serve a narcissist, because instead of being on our path, instead of opening our doors, we're like a doorman opening the doors for this other person. And it's like, well, where's my stuff? Like, they're getting all this stuff. Where's my stuff? But it's because we're on their path. And so what we need to do now that we've released this story, we've released these proofs, we've done our soul retrieval and realigned with our dreams and desires. Now, our heart center is open and filled with our rockets of desire, again, as Abraham Hicks would say. And what we're being told is that in order for a compass to work, it has to be oriented to something. It needs to be magnetized to something, right? And so we need to send out our rocket ships of desire so that our heart can be the compass that leads us there. We're guideless. We have a compass with no working needle if we don't have our desires out in the world in the future. And yes, we'll draw them to us, but it's like we have to walk and then we meet in the middle kind of thing. And so now that we have our dreams and desires back that are ours, we send out those rocket ships of desire. Our heart becomes a compass that guides us to the way. And then what's happening as we're reorienting with this compass in our heart center is that our frame of reference is reorienting. So we're at the center of the universe. And it's almost like, we're in a simulation, right? And it's almost like we're in an open world game. And we chose what game we were going to play before we got here. That's the blueprint of it, but we have free will. So it's more like Assassin's Creed or Grand Theft Auto or something like that. That's an open world game where we can move however we want. And then there are certain people that we run into, and then you're supposed to push like circle or triangle or whatever to talk to them. And then it'll reveal a clue for our next mission, and then we can go on the mission and do the thing, right? But the thing about these open concept games is that the character that you're playing, the avatar, is always at the center of the frame, because we're always experiencing this never-ending universe from their perspective. And I think that that's like the perfect analogy for life in this simulation that's the 3D matrix. So what we're doing, our heart compass is reorienting towards our dreams and desires, and then our frame of reference is reorienting so that we are at the center of our universe, and now we're playing our game and not someone else's game. A narcissist wants you to play their game for them, and then they reap all the rewards because it's their path. They want you to validate them at every... That's what narcissistic supply is, right? We are offering validation, like, yes, you're doing it right. Oh, I can help you with that. Let me do that. Oh, have you checked this door over here? Oh, I think that character is whatever. Like we become the help person, the little Microsoft paperclip in someone else's game instead of playing our own. So we're still at like 12% or whatever while they're making progress. So we're coming back into our video game. And then what I see is we're being asked to change the hardness level. And up to this point, the difficulty of the game has been set to extremely difficult. And our guides are like, you should set it to easy. Now, this is where resistance comes up, where I'm like, but if we set it to easy, isn't that like cheating? Or are we going to get the benefit of it? Or like, that seems like a bad idea. What if we miss out on X, Y, Z? And what the guides are saying is that it's time we're coming out of a very dark night of the soul. We're coming out of a very heavy karmic burning and release. And this soul retrieval it's like we've had massive surgery or whatever. Like we've gone through a major experience, a major trauma so far in life, and we need a little space to recover. And while we're recovering, all we have to do is set the game to easy. And then as we start to gain our strength back and feel out what it feels like to be in this character, figure out our own game, we can up it a little. Okay, let's move it to medium. Let's move it to hard. Let's move it to very hard. And we can progressively get back. We're not going to miss out on soul points or whatever for doing it this way. It's okay. We need it. We've had it set from extremely difficult from the very beginning, and we didn't have that time to kind of ramp up into it. And so we are choosing to go back to easy to get back on our game, and we'll ramp up, and it'll feel like a smooth takeoff. We'll begin to accelerate instead of starting already at like the speed of light. We'll have space for recovery. It doesn't mean that recovery doesn't mean that we're not playing the game. It just means that we're setting it to easy for a moment. So we set the game to easy, and then it's like, oh, this already feels so much lighter. And my compass is moving and I can feel it. I see some characters in the distance with a little like, come talk to me bubble over their head. And suddenly it's like, oh, I really want to play this game. This game seems fun. How come I haven't been in this game this whole time? And we start to rush off, right? It's like you're excited like a kid in a candy store. You're a person in a new game. And it's almost like you get called into your vortex, which is again that Abraham Hicks illustration of what it feels like to be in your flow. And the way that it shows up is like in Mario, like the game, the Nintendo version, like the early versions. I don't know if it came out in number 3. I feel like I see it in Mario 3, with the Tanuki, the raccoon, the flying raccoon. It was those sandstorms on the sun levels that like are a little cyclone that you can get sucked up into, and it takes you up, straight up. that's what the vortex, your vortex looks like. So you step into it and suddenly you're in this spinning thing and you're floating above everyone. And it's like, oh, this is a great view. And it's easy. You're moving through the crowds, no problem. It's easy to jump to the top of the building and get a bird's eye view to get a better perspective from this vortex that's spinning and taking you up, 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 up. And suddenly it's exciting and you're like ready to shoot off into the world. And it's like, oh, wait, let's do one thing real quick. So we quickly do chakra balancing and clearing. So we start with the crown, we just pull out any gunk and light it up and make sure that it's beautiful. What's it called? Violet white light coming out of your crown. And then your third eye, we clear it out and make sure that it's spinning open, wide, and we're checking both the front and the back of these chakras, and they're spinning and beautiful and bright. And then your throat with that beautiful aquamarine color, and we spin it open and pull out any blocks. And what I was shown is that without desires in our hearts, our voices feel a little bit like we can't trust it. And so even though there's still like a part of our throat knows, like even though we were protecting our dreams, it doesn't mean that they weren't there. They were just hard to access. It was unclear, and it was easy to fall for, if someone was like, well, that's dumb. Like, oh yeah, you're right. That's probably not what I want anyway. I should want this other thing. So, our throats could get really clogged easily from that. And so we pulled all that gunk out. And then we moved into the heart space and made sure it was spinning open and green. And our heart has this beautiful compass on it now, and both the front and the back, and then the solar plexus. And what I saw is that the solar plexus is the part of us that's like kind of wounded the most from having this amber egg in there. And so over time, we like spin it open, and that's the part of us that's going to heal the most, which is like our gut health. And so while we're reintegrating this energy, it's your gut that's going to start to really like come back online. This strong sense of self, this strong sense of internal self is going to come back. And that's the part that really gets, beaten to submission or, like squashed with a narcissistic abuse dynamic. Like we can't trust who we are, which is the most tragic thing that I think comes out of narcissistic abuse. Like even if they say that it only takes like one bad relationship, even as an adult, you could be like a strong, powerful person, and then you end up in this dynamic and it's enough to lose your sense of self. And so that's the part of us that is coming back online. And our sacral, we open that up and it sends a fire that's like a spiraling fire up our spine and up our front and lights up our solar plexus so that it can radiate up. It just sends this momentum like a chain reaction of events by lighting up our sacral and sending it up our spine. And then our roots, we allow the root, make sure it's spinning red and open on the front and the back. And then we root down into the earth as this person. But the root is like a bungee, like a vine. And so when we're in our vortex, it's like we could still go up and our feet don't have to touch the earth, but we're still rooted to the center of the earth because we're very much a part of the earth. So we can exist in that middle space where we're not perfectly grounded and pinned to the ground, but we can jump and float and expand and explore the universe that is this game that we've created for ourselves to play, our game that's going to feel so perfect because it's exactly where we belong. And there's going to be challenges or else it wouldn't be a very fun game. I mean, I started playing like a puzzle game, and the first 20 levels are always the hardest for me to get through because they're not challenging enough, right? Like you do want challenges. It just doesn't need to be like the kind of challenge where it's like, what is the, like, I don't know, that makes us feel like we're awful, like incapable, deserving of punishment or whatever, like there's certain challenges that it creates this story of us being bad or wrong or not belonging or whatever. And those challenges don't feel great. They do help us get back to the feeling of like, wait a minute, that story's wrong. I do belong because it's my life. And we're trying to move away from that. I think from this experience, what I'm seeing is that we tend to feel that way more. It's like, when I feel that way, when you feel that way, it's usually a sign that you're in someone else's game because you don't belong. You feel like you don't belong because you're not in your game. So get back in your game. This is your game. It's meant to be fun. It's meant to have challenges. You're meant to get through them and feel better at the end of it. And if you don't, then it's time to reassess whose game you're actually playing. And so from there, you go on your way to play this game. We surround you with beautiful Reiki energy. It's funny because you zoom off and then your angels and spirit guides are like, oh, well, bye. See you later. We're going to go too. And they follow behind you. And so it's like you're a team of people who are interacting with this world and playing in this world that's exciting. And you know exactly where you're headed now because your compass is oriented to something. And that's it.